10 minutes or something like that for a quick discussion. Let me first ask Mr. Hansius if you're still with us. As I understand, we give our data to big companies, and so they are regulated how they use it. And on the other hand, we have the hackers who can get our data and do whatever they want with it. Which is the highest risk, by your opinion? Who do we have to fear most?
So let's begin framing this slightly differently. You give data to large corporates by virtue of the fact that you're using some of the services, and also by virtue of the fact that you choose to give some data because you would like to get also something as part of that process. So yes, you do give data, but also you get something for it in return. Or sometimes that data is necessary in order to actually have the service running, have the service working. So this exchange, if you like, is also something that you as a user to a large degree control. You can decide not to make data available or to decide to make a limited data set available, okay? And in any case, that activity is legal and therefore regulated, and therefore the industry cannot just do with the data what they want. So the statement that we give the data and industry does with it what it wants, I'm sorry, it goes pretty much against what the whole regulatory framework is all about. It's not how this happens. On the other hand, if a bad guy, if a hacker gets your data, well, they can certainly do whatever they want with it because they got them illegally. They're not bound by the legal framework. It's, it's the equivalent of theft in the physical world, right? So what's the risk? What's the bigger risk? Well, what is a bigger risk? That you bring your car to the garage and you have the engineers doing maintenance on it and you don't have possession of that car for an hour? Or is it that somebody takes your car and drives away with it? I mean, I think the answer is pretty obvious. Of course, let's say the intrusion, the hacking is much more dangerous. But I would say that the current regulatory framework gives also to us, the user, the owner, the data controller, or the data subject for that matter, an obligation, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. There are no rights without also responsibilities. So it's our obligation to make sure that we are understanding of how we make our data available, how we use our data, who we share our data with, and obviously that we share with organizations that we feel are able to handle them in a secure manner and have the proper defenses in place. Because if they don't, well, guess what? There is a risk that this data is going to be stolen, and then, yes, they will be used uncontrollably.
So thank you. And using your example about taking your car for a mechanic for some repairs, I'd like to ask Mr. Koziris. So using this paradigm, we have the data, which the value is within the data, and then we have all the application who extract this value from the data. Mr. Koziris, from your experience, which is the most valuable thing? What is the most important thing, the data or the applications?
Okay, thank you, Konstantinos. Let me first comment on what Elias just said. How are we handling our data is a really big issue and a big discussion, and not only in terms of the people and the private sector, but in the public sector, and more in the public sector, because we have all the data sovereignty issue. Where are the data of the people, of the citizens being held? And by this, because it's really we are highly concerned about this, and by this I'm just bridging to your question. I'm sure that you all have heard that the data are the oil of the 21st century, that the data is the power, the new form of energy. So actually the data are the raw energy for empowering everything. But data without proper applications are meaningless. So I think it's a combination, and these vast, the tremendous power of the data with the right applications that can do many things. They can predict, they can simulate, they can find new things, they can manipulate. We have all seen applications and networks that can manipulate even the public opinion in many things, are all situated in data centers. And the data centers are the new national infrastructures and the weapons of the 21st century. So to summarize, data plus applications in data centers are the new weapons for a country. So it's really important to have a national strategy for these things.
So I will have comments on this, but maybe we want to do that later. Maybe we want to give to Georgia the floor, or you want me to react to that?
Let's have one question for Georgia, and then if we have time, we can back to the topics. So Georgia, so we have the apps, we have the data, and we have the infrastructure to build some products and transform that to economic activity. What's the competitive advantage of Thessaloniki in doing that? Because we heard that data are international, we can transfer with very high speeds everywhere. Application developers are hosted everywhere. Why come in Thessaloniki? And what's the status of the infrastructure right now? How that's a question from the public. How far are we from establishing a company in the Thesintech?
Okay, let me answer the first question also as a researcher on mobility, where we're operating here in Thessaloniki, the Smart Mobility Living Lab, where we're collecting data from different sources, and we're developing application for, and we're dealing with this issue of how we make the data secured and how we bring added value to that. So it seems, if I try to say what is important, the data or the application, in fact, the data are important, but if you find a way, application is one way to create to extract knowledge out of it and extract, let's say, possibility of supporting the community, supporting the decision makers. This is the value that it can be created out of the data. Why they should come in Thessaloniki? Because indeed, a part of we have, first of all, very talented engineers, and they can do the job. The second thing is that we have research applications and academia that they, a part of collecting data, they experiment, they have experiment on how structure the data, how exploit the data, how bring added value to those that they can offer the data. And then implementation of technology, the degree of implementation of the technology and the degree of research initiatives and company sensitivities to this field is very important. And I think in Thessaloniki we have it. We have companies that right now they are supporting automotive industry around the world. We have, as I said, test bed living labs, state-of-the-art research, very excellent research. So this is the three reasons for which investors should come and look in that, and they are doing it already. And what we see in Thesintech from the two projects that are related to that, the Mega Project 3 on artificial intelligence and future mobility application, these three competitive advantages attract the interest of outside Greece for in this issue of data and development. Now, regarding the infrastructure of Thesintech, we are running now on taking the let's say the license and start building our infrastructure there. And actually, I will conduct Mr. Koziris and Mr. Hansos in order to see what type of infrastructure, what standards we should create for our infrastructure regarding connectivity, and that it will be very important for us to create a state-of-the-art thing that can host those that they can test the future innovation, not the innovation of today. And this is what we get from United States, where they have their own test bed on connected automated mobility, and we see thinking on beyond what we understand as a standard now. So this type of forums, they bring us together with the people that they can guide us very, very, very correctly. Thank you.
Okay, so we are on schedule. Any closing remarks by one of you? Because people want to go for their virtual coffee.
Well, I'll react to something that I'll react to something that Nektarios just said. So, I would not approach. So the dilemma between data or application, I believe, is a false dilemma. Okay, and the reason why is the quality of the data will determine the output of the application, and equally, if the application is not properly designed, even the best data are not going to fix the application result. Okay. At the same time, I want to challenge slightly. Not that I disagree. I often hear this, the oil example, but I want to challenge the example that Nektarios is giving about the oil, because you know what? Last time I checked, when I drive my car, I burn the oil, I burn the fuel, and then I have to refuel it, and I cannot reuse the oil that I burned. Whereas with the data is there. Maybe we can use it for we can recycle the data in the sense that we can use the same data set multiple times. And sure, there's data set that their lifespan, for example, is very short, is very limited, and loses its value. But for another, let's say there are other data sets that have a very long lifespan. So the oil example is a good example to show the industrious revolution linked to data, but at the same time is a bad example in terms of the nature of the oil. Digital sovereignty, very quickly. Yes, digital sovereignty, and I understand the point, but I think it's something very important for a government, but I think we need to take a step back and reflect on what do we mean with digital sovereignty? Because quite frankly, here in Brussels, we haven't for sure figured that out yet. Do we mean sovereignty over the data? Do we mean over the infrastructure? Do we mean assurances on how we manage the data and how we manage the software code behind it? Do we mean creating an industrial base? Do we mean national champions? What do we really mean? I understood more around control of the infrastructure as opposed to everything else linked with digital sovereignty. And I say that because very often digital sovereignty is linked with protectionism. And I think in the case of Greece, in the case of Thessaloniki, it's the investments that you're trying to attract, not the other way around, to lock them up in one particular location. So the notion of sovereignty needs to be very clearly understood. Final point, weapons of 21st century. I totally agree that data centers are a critical national infrastructure, certainly for the government space, that will be very, very important for the way that we digitize the industry and the way we digitize our activities. I do agree that certain applications can have military or intelligence usage, but I would argue that a drone, let's say, with artificial intelligence and a payload can be a more effective weapon for the way I understand, at least, warfare than some of the data center aspects. But, it's a fascinating discussion, no doubt.
Okay, so it's a big debate. We could go along for a long time. I would like to thank everybody, our speakers for these sessions.